So in December of 2019, I stepped on the scale and weighed my highest weight ever. And I was a little embarrassed and overwhelmed and was like, I've got to make a change. And so I adopted a whole food, plant-based, mostly unprocessed way of eating. And it changed my life. But the number one success tip that I had or that I learned was to plan my meals and my snacks.
Welcome to the Plant-Based DFW Podcast Weekly Show with Dr. Riz and Maya. Our podcast focuses on lifestyle medicine, which is the use of evidence-based lifestyle therapeutic approaches, such as a whole food plant-based diet, regular physical exercise, adequate sleep, and stress management to treat and even reverse the lifestyle-related chronic diseases that are all too prevalent. Every week, we will feature physicians, dietitians, health coaches, and everyday people who will share their stories and speak on one of these lifestyle medicine modalities. Let's meet today's podcast guest. Kathy Davis is a plant-based lifestyle coach, recipe developer, and CEO of VegInspired, where she helps people successfully transition to a plant-based diet with practical tips, strategies, and easy and delicious recipes without added stress in the kitchen. Kathy has a master's degree in education and years of coaching experience. She achieved her goal of losing 35 pounds on a plant-based diet in 2020 after setting a goal to eat more plants and less processed foods. She has the strategies to help you achieve your goal. She learned the ins and outs of cooking and creating delicious plant-based recipes with whole food ingredients alongside her husband, John. They are currently traveling in their fifth wheel RV with their 3 cats across the United States on a mission to visit all the national parks. This is episode 103, and in this episode, Kathy shares with us a little about her RV life and how she has managed to remain on a whole food plant-based diet, and offers us some practical tips so that we can stay on a plant-based diet as well. Also, her cat, Pete, makes an appearance in the video. Finally, we talk about Kathy's 30-minute whole food plant-based cookbook, which is now available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback. I will include the link in the show notes if you are interested in purchasing a copy, and she also has a Facebook by the same name, VegInspired. Make sure to check it out. I had a lot of fun chatting with Kathy, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. Thanks again for listening. So welcome, Kathy.
Hi, thank you so much, Maya, for having me. I am excited to be here and share strategies that I've learned along the way. And of course, it's always fun to dive in and share a little bit about the behind the scenes of RV life. So I'm happy to do that.
Yes, so we can even start with that. So many people who listen to us or who follow us on social media know that my husband and I are big into sailing and living in a smaller space. And I've made in the past some videos on how you can cook and prepare simple meals in the galley of a sailboat. Because sometimes when we do leave the shore and we go and travel, we're relying on whatever I already batch cooked in my little Instant Pot. And now I may be heating in our propane stove in the galley, like I said. So let's start with that. Tell us where you're at and how life has been. And also, let's make a point to mention that this is February and we're going through this Texas storm. Have you been going through that as well?
Yes. So we are currently parked in Alpine, Texas. It's about an hour and a half north of Big Bend National Park on the western side of Texas. And we have encountered snow, and we've encountered snow a few times this winter. This is our third winter in our RV. The last 2 winters we stayed in Florida, so we enjoyed a much warmer, more consistent climate. In Texas, we've seen days, it's 70 degrees one day, and then the next day a cold front blows in, and a very, abnormal cold front for this part of the country, and we have snow and frigid temperatures. So we have really had some new experiences to deal with this winter that we had not encountered before, and it's made RV life a little interesting. Fortunately for us, we did not lose power, and we were able to prepare for the water usage, because the water hose goes from the outside of the camper to the spigot. That froze. So we had to have other alternative uses for water, but we were able to do that, and it worked out just fine. And you may see my little cat tail here. Oh, So I travel with 3 cats, and they're very unpredictable, and they like to be where I am. So I do apologize if that's distracting, but he thinks I'm talking to him.
I think it'll be nice if we get to see your furry friends. Oh, there he is. We can see a little bit more of him. What's his name?
His name is Eddie.
Hi, Eddie. So I like the idea of living a simpler life. I'm actually at heart within my dream would be to have a tiny house. That's just what I love. I can live in one room. So do you also, because I know there are limitations, like you say, you haven't had problems with water, but do you have a Berkey or some sort of filtration system to kind of clean your own water as you go?
So that's an interesting question. We actually have an onboard system. And so we upgraded, it's an onboard water filtration system. It's actually built into the line. And we upgraded the filters that we use for that. And then we use a standard Brita filter that we actually had from our house 2 years ago. And we kept saying, oh, we should get something else, but there's nothing wrong with the Brita. And so we just haven't taken the plunge to do Berkey. And our RV is interesting. It has windows on both sides. So there honestly isn't really a countertop that the Berkey would sit in. So it may require some additional, navigation or figuring out where we could put that to travel.
So let's get started in terms of how you started VegInspired, your website. You're a health coach, so you help people transition to eating more plant-based foods, and also you give them tips. You are a recipe developer. How did you even start this way of life? Because you have mentioned that you're a former educator.
I am a former educator. I went to school to be a teacher. And when I first adopted a vegan lifestyle, it was really for health. Like I was going to eat more plants and really take more of the healthiest options. So the healthiest veggies, and at that time I was still planning to eat animal products because I thought just by adding more veggies, I would be a-okay. And that's a great place to start. And honestly, I loved that transition because it gave me time to find what I really liked. It gave me time to find recipes that I liked, people that I wanted to follow, people that inspired me. I followed a lot of the works of the plant-based doctors, Dr. McDougall, Dr. Greger, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Caldwell, and really embraced that plant-based living. So when I officially made the decision to no longer eat animal products, I was like, I need to share these recipes with people and they need to see how easy plant-based eating can be. And I was so excited and so passionate. And so I started VegInspired really as a place to share recipes and inspire people to eat more plants. And that has always been my driving mission and vision, is to really inspire people to eat more plants. Creating recipes that are easy enough for anybody to get in the kitchen and try. Ones that are flavored with ingredients that anybody can find. That's always been my passion. And through VegInspired, other opportunities have presented themselves. And that's been really great.
You have a support group called VegInspired Foodies.
I do have a Facebook support group called VegInspired Foodies. And I actually do a free live training in there every week. I'm active in the group. I answer questions. I share meal plans and recipes, and those foodies always get the inside scoop on all the things that I'm working on too. So I know that they find a lot of value in that, and they're very thrilled. And it's a very hands-on support group in the Facebook community.
It really is. Prior to being plant-based, I wasn't active at all on Facebook or even a member of any of the groups. And then I joined a bunch of groups, but I find that I like learning from people as well as sharing resources. And it's interesting to me, or just fascinating, how active most people are in the Facebook groups in terms of doing their own research, staying on top of this literature, really adopting a lot of things that are being shared. And these Facebook groups really truly are supportive for people that are curious, from being curious all the way to fully on board with the plant-based diet.
Yes, and I definitely do. I like to talk to all spectrums, everybody on the spectrum, whether you're an omnivore that's curious about eating plants and really wants to just add more kale to your diet or try a new vegetable. Like I love sharing recipes that help people, do that. But then I also like to take those seasoned plant-based eaters or vegans that have been vegan since, tofu was really the only option and really help get their perspective, because I find that is just they're just such a wonderful wealth of information and they have such unique perspectives. So I really try to make that group very inclusive and, just get people talking about their experiences.
So, what are some of the obstacles that you hear from people that are like the reasons why they're just not eating more plant-based foods?
The biggest obstacle that I hear from my clients is time. Um, you know, Everybody is busy. We're all pulled in 1,000 directions, and all the things in life happen. Whether it's a COVID year or a non-COVID year, people have really been just pulled into this busyness, and I my life has really slowed down. My commute to work is a few steps down through the RV. I have the convenience of being right here in my house to make the foods. And my life just, slowed down a lot more after we moved into the RV. But I found that because it slowed down, I had more time to cook. But my challenge is I don't have a dishwasher. So if a recipe takes 6 pots and 15 spoons and all this ridiculousness, I can relate to the people that have this busyness or the time, because my time isn't necessarily spent prepping the meal, it's spent cleaning up the meal. So I really have been, worked really hard to create easy recipes that don't have a lot of cleanup or take a lot of prep time. I find that we're a society of convenience shoppers. And so, you can use those convenient whole foods, pre-cooked veggies, pre-cooked beans, pre-prepped, your cauliflower you buy already chopped up. Or if you want to be more budget conscious, you can buy the ingredients and prep them yourself. So I think there's 2 levels. Time is an obstacle, but then also there's the money and the prep work obstacle. So I like to balance my recipes and say, you can do this potato and broccoli recipe a couple of ways, right? You can prep the potatoes and prep your broccoli, or you can buy shredded potatoes or pre-washed potatoes, or the small little potatoes that you can just wash and throw in the pot. You don't have to prep them, but you may pay a little more for the prepped ingredients. So I try to preface that while I'm working with people and sharing this information both in my group and with my clients.
I agree with you that finding different ways to make it easier for the individual is key. What are some of the either appliances that you would recommend people just have to just make it so much easier and doable in terms of cooking? And what about storage? Because I know when we have lived off the grid and all of that, and we are always going to be limited on a sailboat, you're probably even more limited in terms of storage. I don't know. What is that like for you?
So we are limited in terms of storage, but not in the way you think. We have room for all of the things we want to store. We have even stocked up on items for a month's worth of groceries during the pandemic when we were traveling. We didn't know what the grocery stores would have, so we stocked up a little bit. But our issue isn't space. Our issue is weight. So we have a 5th wheel, and there is a cargo weight limit, which we're not really close to. But we have to be very cognizant of the, canned items and heavy grains and things like that. Those all add weight to what we're towing. So our storage challenge comes more from weight, not space. And so we did downsize from a standard, 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath house in Pennsylvania when we left. So we did have appliances that we had to get rid of. But we also had to keep in mind the weight of the appliances that we were bringing with us, and also the location. I mean, it comes to a point when you can't just keep expanding out, right? The camper's only so big.
And what are some of the more typical foods that you guys enjoy cooking in your RV?
So we eat a lot of potatoes. they seem to hold up really well. And with the 3 cats, we haven't had any rodent issues, thank goodness. We eat a lot of brown rice. Probably our go-to appliance is our rice cooker. We actually have a stovetop pressure cooker, so we never invested in an instant pot because if we had to cook on propane, if we didn't have electric, we wouldn't necessarily use the instant pot that you plug in, right? We would have to use the pressure cooker on the propane stove. So we hadn't invested in the instant pot before we left. So we kind of get by without it, and we've been okay. We do have a rice cooker that we use all the time, but we could certainly boil rice in a pot if we needed to, if we didn't have electric, if we weren't hooked up to shore power, and we were using propane to cook. We cook a lot of potatoes, we cook a lot of brown rice, and then we are fortunate to have an RV that actually has a fairly decent sized refrigerator. So we are able to, buy a week's worth of fresh produce. So we eat a lot of fresh veggies or roasted veggies. When we first left home or first moved into this, our freezer didn't really stay as cold as we would have liked. So we did transition more to a lot of fresh veggies. In the colder weather, the freezer works great though.
So you're going to share with us some tips in terms of daily habits and mindset that we can incorporate so that we can be successful on the diet, and then also some easy recipe ideas. So feel free to share however you'd like.
Yes. So I have 2 key tips that I think work really, really well for this. And if you are a VegInspired foodie follower or you followed me for long enough, you probably already know what tip number 1 is, because sometimes they sound like a broken record, but it is all about planning. So in December of 2019, I stepped on the scale and weighed my highest weight ever. And I was a little embarrassed and overwhelmed and was like, I've got to make a change. And so I adopted a whole food, plant-based, mostly unprocessed way of eating, and it changed my life. But the number 1 success tip that I had, or that I learned, was to plan my meals and my snacks. It was a game changer. And so in that planning, I have 2 things that you can do to set yourself up for success with meal planning. 1, treat your meals like an appointment on your calendar. So when you sit down to make your grocery list and look at next week's schedule, look at next week and what you're going to cook, look at your calendar. If Wednesday nights are super busy because you've got kids events and, a meeting that's late at work and you're not going to have time, plan in an easy meal, plan in leftovers from Tuesday. Really look at your calendar so that you can alleviate the overwhelm when you get into the kitchen. There's nothing worse than that what's for dinner conversation that everybody spends 30 minutes going back and forth, and you end up ordering out, which it might be unaligned to your goals. So meal plan is number 1. And then the first caveat to that is treat your meals like a calendar appointment, right? Put them in based on what your schedule looks like. Number 2 under the meal planning is plan. I like to call it routine planning. So Mondays, I always eat like a meatless meal option. So maybe cauliflower steaks, or maybe chickpea meatloaf patties, or maybe you do like a veggie burger. And then Tuesdays, always tacos. So, for 4 weeks, I might have 4 different types of tacos that I'm going to eat. And then on Wednesdays, it might be a Buddha bowl or bowl meal. So maybe the first Wednesday of the month, I do burrito bowls. The second one, maybe we do noodle bowls. The third one might be a quinoa, bowl. And the fourth one might be a potato bowl. I don't know. And just so continue through the week with a routine, and then just rotate different recipes into that routine. So that's tip number 1, meal plan.
Can I add to that? I like that. I don't want to interrupt your flow. I taught my husband 2 things. I bought him a wok. And so he does all the stir fries, right? And he loves it. I made it very easy. And then cauliflower pizza. So I have all the ingredients. We do buy the already made crust. And then he takes over and does that.
That's one of the things I love about meal planning, is that when I'm busy, I can say this is the recipe I'm cooking tonight. The ingredients are in there, just go with it. And if
Okay.
I'm like if something comes up, right, I mean, it's easy for those of us that kind of run our own business maybe to plan ahead, and or if you work a pretty structured job that's like 9 to 5, you may not have that late client meeting or that call as you're walking out of the office. But not everybody has that predictable night, right? So if something
Right.
comes up and you've already planned the meal and you know the recipe, you can hand that off. Or if you have a
Yes.
sick child, or if, a parent needs you, it really allows you to
Right.
kind of say, okay, this is what we're cooking and you can do it. You'll be
Yes.
okay. Follow the recipe.
Yeah, because Kathy, I found myself at one point, I'm not the type of person that opens the fridge and stands there. It's not a criticism at all. I'm not that person. And I know that a lot of people do that. I kind of know what I want to do, and then I'm just looking for the ingredients. But what made it easy for me is to make a list of all the foods we've already kind of mastered that are plant-based. So like tacos, like you said, burritos and soups and things like that. And so they're on, what are you craving? And I bet we have something. It's either in a can or we just throw it in the rice maker or put it in the Instant Pot, or, but it's so that you're not sitting there trying to figure out, what do I want to eat today? Not having a plan.
I call it like the dinner overwhelm. That
Yes.
moment when you walk into the kitchen at 6 o'clock and everybody's hungry, and it doesn't matter if everybody is you and a spouse, you and your family, you and your kids, it doesn't matter who's there. They're
Mhm.
hungry. The dog might be whining for food, the cat too. I mean, everybody's hungry and you're having dinner overwhelm. And it is so frustrating. And a lot of people pivot right back to their old habits. And so if you are looking to make a consistent change, meal planning helps to alleviate that overwhelm and really keep you on track to that goal.
Awesome. Okay, and you have more tips. I won't interrupt.
So, tip number 2 is, and this is one that, a lot of people do differentiate a little bit on it, but it was what made me successful in losing those 35 pounds after adopting that whole food plant-based lifestyle, is progress over perfection. I tell this story every time. I made a commitment on December 1st that I was going to eat whole plant foods, mostly unprocessed, with a focus on high starch. That was December 1st of 2019. On December 7th, we pulled our RV to Key West, right? The paradise of all outdoor dining and fancy restaurants and little bars to go, to listen to music. And I'm like, how am I going to navigate this lifestyle situation when I want to stick to a way of eating aligned with a goal to lose weight, right? Like, I knew what my goal was. I knew how I wanted to eat. How am I going to navigate this? And so I came internally and was like, it's about progress. So if we're, and again, I'm a planner, so I had a plan for the week. But if we're out riding our bike, we rode our bike from the campground into Key West, and we got down there and we were both like, wow, I'm kind of hungry and I didn't really plan a snack. So we stopped at a little cafe and I was like, oh, I could get vegan key lime cheesecake. That's not aligned with my goal, right? That's not going to help me lose weight, but I'm not going to eat that every day. I'm not going to make this an everyday habit. I can have this little afternoon snack with a nice cup of decaf, black coffee or a cup of tea. And it's not, it's a one-off thing. So I really focused my whole time on not every day. It's not about eating a little dessert every day. It's about eating what's aligned to your goal every day. And then if those circumstances, situations, and events that might lead you off, for a meal or a snack, you just can pivot right back on and get on to that way of eating, because your whole day isn't ruined because you made one mistake or made one intentional decision. You're right back on track. So you're focusing on this lifestyle change with progress, tracking your progress, celebrating each win, celebrating each success, and then, really sticking to what aligns with your goal on a day-to-day and an intentional basis. So that's tip
That's
number 2.
So that's a great tip. I love it. Just be gentle with yourself and then celebrate your progress, because the more you do it, the more you practice those habits, the more you're a long-term way of life, right? Maybe I'm just imagining, but people that live in RVs and sailboats, they tend to eat more fruits and vegetables. At least that's what I keep seeing. I don't know if that's true or not.
I feel that could be because we tend to chase the climate. And so those fresh fresh produce is more readily available. I was having a conversation with a colleague the other day, and we were talking about just the way that RV life has allowed me to really get in a whole lot more fresh produce because I tend to follow the climate. So I have access to different growing seasons when I'm, in South Florida for the winter. It's just there's just different veggies and things available.
Let's talk about your being a recipe developer. What is your process? Do you try to take this standard American kind of diet or traditional and transition them into, change them up to be more plant-based, or how do you even start with your recipes?
So I do a combination. My husband was actually the chef early on in all of this. I call him the chef, but it was like a home chef. He loved to cook before we went plant-based. So when we made the transition, I just let him cook. I mean, I didn't really know what was going on. And so over the last 6.5 years, I've learned a lot of the techniques and strategies on cooking without oil and, flavor profiles that I prefer. And so I like to make recipes that I call them, they're like recipes that kind of mimic standard American meals, but also allow people who, I don't really, if somebody doesn't really like meat, they're not going to want a meaty patty. So how can we make this, a fun recipe that a lot of people will enjoy with common ingredients that they probably already like? So that's been one of my big focuses the last, 6 months, especially when writing the 30-minute whole food plant-based cookbook, was really to focus on ingredients that people already use, right? Do you already have oats in your house? Can we make your oatmeal that you add animal stuff to? Can we make that vegan by substituting plant-based milk or, maple syrup or dates? Can we, are you already eating beans? Can we make the beans the center of your meal by adding flavors to them? We make a chickpea gyro where we lightly roast the chickpeas with a lot of flavors, a lot of, spices and herbs, and we use a little bit of vinegar to kind of get them, to be really like have this delicious flavor. But they're the center of this meal. And then so when I approach a new recipe or a new idea or kind of, going into something, how can I make this recipe easy and taste good, but also something that, will appeal to multiple people? Could this be a black bean recipe, but if you don't like black beans, you could use chickpeas. So I like the swaps and that swap mentality. And that's how I approach it. I have a lot of clients will say, I can't look at my pantry and just pull together a meal like you can. And I said, well, it's a lot of trial and error, right? I mean, I pretty much will use potatoes or rice as a base to most of my meals, or beans. And then what do I have that will go well with that? I recently found that I really like sweet potatoes, broccoli, black beans, and a tahini sauce. I just think the combination of those 4 ingredients just is awesome. Who knew? I just pulled things together that I had in the house that I needed to use up.
Yeah, I like that you emphasize that as your base, you have the potatoes and the rice, because I am very much about starchy meals so that I can feel satisfied and yet I don't feel stuffed. And so sweet potatoes, especially when they're roasted, oh my goodness, that whole combination that you just mentioned are like some of my favorite foods as well. Your cookbook is available right now on Kindle.
On Amazon, it's a Kindle edition.
Okay, and it's called a 30-minute whole food plant-based cookbook.
Correct.
Okay, and do you go over some of those recipes in your Facebook group?
I do share some of them, yes. Mm-hmm. I've done a couple of videos on my YouTube channel of some of the recipes. I shared the skillet spinach and artichoke dip, which is nut-free. A lot of people make it with a cashew base, but we did not. And then I shared our whole food plant-based tiramisu, and the cake is an ingredient that would surprise people. So that's always fun. It was it just happened one day. I was like, you know what if I did this? And so it all worked out and it tastes delicious.
I'm going to have to look into the artichoke dip. I have yet to make one. I never even made it before I was plant-based, but I love those two ingredients of artichoke and spinach. So I'm going to have to try that one. Do you have personal clients that you work directly with?
I do. I offer one-to-one coaching, but I also have a group coaching program. And that program is very, very high touch. So there's, the time that you get, the time that you put into it is really up to you. But the accessibility to me is very high in that program. So you have your one-to-one coaching during, each month. And then we have group coaching every week, things on meal planning. We co-meal plan. So we all sit down with our calendars and plan together. So there's a lot of accessibility and training in that program that helps people both take the next step to their plant-based eating goal, but also holds them accountable. So, and the fun part is you get to do it with a tribe or a group of people. And so it's been really, really well received, and they're just thrilled with the group aspect. It's more fun with friends, right?
It really is. And so I'm assuming, do you do those on Zoom?
I do. So I utilize both Facebook and YouTube for my standard trainings, my standard live sessions, and then I do Zoom calls so that the group can kind of interact together, and we do those weekly. And then the meal planning is monthly, and that's a group Zoom call as well. And I really encourage people to come with some ideas. If you tried a really good chili, let's drop that in the chat. Or if the link in the chat, or if you had this awesome dessert or snack that, you really want to share. And so everybody in my group is on different levels. I have some people who are whole food, plant-based, and they want to eat even cleaner with mostly unprocessed or no salt and oil. But I also have omnivores who just want to eat more plants. So it really is great to kind of expose everybody to these different way of eating, because it usually stems conversations about, when I cut out oil, I felt better, and just things like that. So I just love the conversations that come and the support that people get from each other as well.
I like participating in all of that, even though, and I've said it in the past, even though I'm plant-based, I still like signing up for classes and being part of groups. And so you might have mentioned it earlier on, but what was your level of skills in terms of, cooking? Did you yourself ever take cooking classes in the past, or because you seem to be very comfortable now, of course?
Yes. So I have taken I've been trying to get through the Ruby cooking school. But I've taken a lot of the flavors and the actual tactics in the kitchen, knife skills. And honestly, the real reason that I took the knife skill section was because when I'm chopping on video, I wanted to make sure my fingers were where they were supposed to be, because there's nothing more frustrating than watching somebody on a YouTube video chopping with their fingers in the way and thinking, oh gosh, please don't cut yourself on camera. So I wanted to be the YouTuber that nobody thought that was going to happen.
I know, I've noticed myself sometimes when I have made some food demo type videos, it's like, oh, I know better than, and my husband, he's like, oh my God, are you okay? You want me to come and help and cut that for you? And I always kind of tease him, are you sure you're okay? You can use the knife. He's like, honey, I cut people open for a living. He's like, I fillet. He calls it having a finesse when he's working. I know what you mean about getting through the Ruby course. I signed up for it in, I want to say 2019. And my first class, I was on the sailboat. And you know how they tell you to do the mise en place and kind of have all your ingredients and photograph it so that they know that you're doing the work? Oh my goodness, that was so tricky. But I really want to complete it so I can just have that certificate that says, I know how to boil water at a proper temperature. But I think those are skills that we gain with practice as the more time we spend in the kitchen.
I definitely know. I mean, I'm a perfect example of gaining those skills in the kitchen. And one of the things that really helped me is actually watching cooking shows on TV. And I know that that's, seems counterintuitive, especially for somebody when, there's not a whole lot of plant-based cooking shows on TV. But I found such, joy in watching these chefs on TV share their passion. And my husband really gained a lot of the science behind cooking information. And so, I'll have these in-depth conversations about if it's sweating or sauteing. And, and sweating is really when you let them kind of steam in their liquid when they're covered. Those are all new things that I learned as I was getting into cooking over the last few years. So it's just been interesting kind of learning the words associated with the techniques. I mean, I was doing it, but I didn't know that's what it was called.
I was watching a cooking show that's based off a movie. These happen to be men in the kitchen. Sometimes they have a female guest, but it's mainly men. And they're just whipping things together, and they're like, I know how to do kimchi. What do you have? I'll make some kimchi from that. Or what do you have in the fridge? And I started to notice that my husband would just go to the kitchen and take like more initiative in terms of putting meals together. It really brings back the joy of why you're coming together in the kitchen, why you're cooking, and the joy of sitting down and sharing a meal that you guys prepared together.
Yeah, that's a great benefit to watching that show, is having the extra hands in the kitchen. Yes. I always tell people that I don't watch the show and the cooking shows and think that that's actually animal products or unhealthy food. I actually think, ooh, how am I going to make that whole food plant-based? I mean, I'm like, ooh, they just did, I don't know, buffalo wings. I grew up in Western New York, so buffalo wings were a huge, a pretty regular thing. And I'm always looking for ways to get buffalo sauce into my meals. And so I'll be like, ooh, they did a buffalo whatever wrap. And I'm like, how can I make that whole food plant-based? So that's my inspiration. I just kind of ignore the fact that it's not healthy or it's not vegan.
There's some art to cooking that I think and some zen, by the way, also, especially for me when I'm in the kitchen. So I was wondering, can you tell our listeners, just give them a little bit of a hint of what they can find in your recipe book, because they are 30-minute meals. So that's encouraging. What kind of foods can they find in there?
So it's really a variety. There's a whole chapter on breakfasts. If you're like me, breakfast was always something that I kept going back and trying to find another breakfast idea. And so we have a few recipes in there that are fun, kind of based off of our experiences and where we've been. And then there's actually a whole chapter on snacks as well. So I struggled with breakfast as, finding something other than a smoothie or oatmeal as an idea. And so I have a whole chapter on breakfast. And then I love snacks. That was my biggest weakness, and where I really found I would eat a lot more processed foods, because I would, snacks are convenience, right? You want to just walk to the cabinet and grab a bag of whatever. Mm-hmm. And so the snack chapter really helped me kind of dig into other ways that I could get easy snacks that are ready in under 30 minutes. And then salads and handhelds. So I'm really into flavor. So there's a lot of sauces and a lot of, not heat spice, but a lot of flavorful spices, and just really using a lot of the common ingredients that you have to really bring out the flavor. People often ask what ingredients should they buy before they get the cookbook to cook with. That's what question I've been getting. And I'm like, well, I love lemon and lime juice. I love vinegars. I do use miso, some, soy sauce. So there's a lot of, the other ingredients you can probably pick up at your regular grocery store, right? But sometimes miso can be a challenge to find if you're in a more rural area. So I always say, if you really want to add that like saltiness and that umami, grab a tub of miso, and then you'll be ready to cook pretty much everything in the book. Not that it's in every recipe, but there won't be something you can't find at your grocery store.
Right.
And then it ends with desserts and staples. So we have a dessert chapter and homemade staples. And I will tell you that there's 2 recipes in there, homemade staples, that have changed our, just fulfilled us so much. Mm-hmm. We made a homemade enchilada sauce that is so good, and we make it at least every other week since I created the recipe for the cookbook. And then also a homemade barbecue sauce and a homemade ketchup. And they are easy to make, and again, at your regular grocery store, and they don't have all those weird ingredients that some of these condiments can have. And so I'm so thrilled with how they turned out that I love to share those. And they're like, it's like a an odd recipe to be like so thrilled with, but
No, actually, that those two things I'm actually looking forward to because, for example, you mentioned your enchilada sauce, which I don't typically make from scratch. I'm going to have to look into that one. And also the ketchup. Ketchup can be loaded with sugar. So how do you sweeten ketchup?
dried fruits.
Of course. Oh my goodness.
And here's a bonus tip. Onion powder has a little bit of sweetness to it. So when you add onion powder to something, it can bring out some of that sweetness, especially in the tomato based, because ketchup's tomato based, and it really can balance that acid, the acid in the tomato.
This is awesome. And you mentioned also your hard copy will be out in March.
The paperback will officially release on March 2nd.
March 2nd.
And then, yes, and the Kindle edition is available. It was available starting on February 16th. So it's available now.
Okay, so I'll provide those two links in the show notes.
It's actually one Amazon link. So we'll just put one Amazon link in there.
And how else are people finding out about your book?
Yes. So I'm doing some pretty, I'm going to say aggressive. I'm really just sharing about it on social media. Like I love to share on social media. So I'm sharing pictures from it. I'm sharing pictures of recipes from it on my Facebook business page and my Instagram. And then we have a handful of reviewers that received early release copies. And so they've been sharing about it. So yes. It's really been just wonderful getting the word out. And the best feeling is when other people have the book in their hands and they're messaging me saying, oh my gosh, I tried the sweet potato and apple breakfast plate and I love it so much. It's going to become a staple in my kitchen. And I'm like, oh, I love it too. I'm so glad you like it. Like that's so much just fills my heart with joy.
Yeah, I bet. So, well, let's talk about your social media and how people can learn more about you. Your website is VegInspired.com.
Yes, I'm on Instagram at VegInspired, and then Facebook is facebook.com/VegInspired or the VegInspired Foodies Facebook group. You can find that. You can message me on Instagram or through Facebook, Kathy Allen Davis, and I can send you the link to those. What else? My YouTube channel is youtube.com/VegInspired. I'm on Twitter, but I don't tweet very often. So you're more likely to find me active on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. So if our listeners do get Kathy's cookbook, make sure that you post photographs and tag her. Share your creation with her recipes. Is there anything else that I might be forgetting that you want to share with our listeners?
I'm just joyful about this way of eating. The power of plants really changed just how I feel in my own skin and how I feel in my heart about, just being able to get this information out. So thanks for having me on here. I absolutely enjoyed my time with you and I appreciate being able to share my knowledge and information with your listeners of the show. Yes. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you. And stay warm out there. I know it's kind of tricky right now with the weather, but you're still preparing all these hearty meals in your RV anyway, right?
Yes, lots of soups lately.
Yeah. Same here. Thank you so much, Kathy Davis of VegInspired. Let us know what you think about this episode and if you're preparing some of the meals from her recipe book. Thanks again for listening, everyone. You've been listening to the Plant-Based DFW podcast show. If you like our content, please like, share, and leave a review. Our goal is to provide quality episodes to help support the community.